Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to slide over here. We are getting ready right now for the announcement from Minister Miller, and Boisonneau, I think, as well, is going to be doing the announcement. And these are all related to the new changes or further, alterations they're going to be making to what appears to be the foreign worker program. But when we look at the actual circular that went out, they've pegged it or described it as an announcement regarding the strengthening of temporary resident programs and migration pathways. So it has to be a little bit more encompassing, but we will see as soon as it goes live here. I'm going to click on this and let's see. All right. Now, I don't know if everybody can hear this. We will see. I don't see. I'm just going to see if I can alter this. So we'll wait till they go live here. And once they go live, then we'll have a little bit to chat about here. Oh, here we go. Okay, we're looking at a nice man bun there. Guy with an orange hat and a mask. Guy with sunglasses. This is the play-by-play. Okay, let's see if we can enlarge it just a bit. Oh, that probably won't work. Okay, let's see. Oh, hey, that worked. Okay, that's good. We got a good screen, you guys. Good screen. Okay, yes, it is intriguing. The question is whether or not we can hear. I know Igor and I were playing around with this a little bit before. I want to make sure that I can that everybody can hear when the speaker is speaking. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I think it might be play app sounds. We'll see. Stream. We're patiently waiting here, everybody. I think we should be okay. Okay, give me a thumbs up, everybody, if you can hear the background noise. Can you hear the white noise in the background? Give me a thumbs up. Can you hear that? Okay, give me a second. I'm going to see if I can figure this out. Yeah, I can hear nothing there. Huh.
So I'm seeing a headline that says Ottawa will cut back again on international students with the 2025 cap. So that's been updated from this.
Okay, give me 1 second, you guys here. Okay, they're speaking French, so just give me a second. Yeah, I can hear you guys. It's definitely not muted, you guys. It's something within my eCam. Come on. Huh.
So, j'étais très clair. Le programme de travailleurs étrangers
I can hear it now,
temporaires
Mark.
a toujours été et sera toujours utilisé comme un dernier recours, une mesure de dernier recours pour combler les postes vacants. Il ne s'agit pas d'un outil pour les travailleurs de
Can you hear
remplacer
now?
les employeurs de
Okay.
remplacer les travailleurs canadiens ou supprimer leur salaire. So, in English, let me state that I've always been clear that the Temporary Foreign Worker Program is and has always been a last resort measure and should never be used to replace Canadian workers who want the jobs, and it should not be used to.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Last month, the PM was clear and announced changes to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and those changes will come into effect September 26th. And I want to just review them because it's going to be important for the substance of my comments today. So these changes included reducing the cap from 20% to 10%, and in census metropolitan areas where the unemployment is higher than 6%, there's a refusal to process in the low wage stream. I've also undertaken over the next now 60 days to come back to you all with our plans on the high wage stream. Donc, pour préciser en français, le Premier ministre a indiqué en août, et les changements vont prendre effet le 26 septembre, que le pourcentage des effectifs qu'une entreprise peut avoir de travailleurs étrangers temporaires a diminué de 20% à 10%. Et dans les régions de recensement métropolitaine où le taux de chômage est plus que 6%, moi, je vais mettre en place, on va avoir en place un refus de traitement de ces demandes. Je confirme aujourd'hui que ce changement s'appliquera également au Québec, au programme de traitement simplifié, qui n'a actuellement pas de plafond. Today, I'm confirming that this change will also be applicable to the traitement simplifié in Quebec, which currently does not have a cap limit. Nous avons également annoncé une réduction de la durée maximale de nouveaux permis de travail pour la catégorie de bas salaire qui passerait de 2 années à 1 an. Cette mesure exclura les employeurs du secteur agricole primaire et inclura les permis de travail relevant au traitement simplifié au Québec. Enfin, je confirme également que la liste des régions métropolitaines de recensement soumises au processus de refus sera mise à jour tous les trimestres à l'aide des données les plus récentes sur le marché du travail afin de garantir qu'elles répondent aux besoins du Canada et qu'elles tiennent compte des taux de chômage régionaux. As I've said before, and I'm going to state it again, the Temporary Foreign Worker Program is an accordion. It's meant to flex with the economy. When we have a high number of vacancies, we can bring in more people, and as the economy tightens, we close the accordion and we make it harder for people to come in because Mark and I and our government want those jobs to go to Canadians. We want them to go to people who live here. We want them to go to students. We want them to go to newcomers. We want them to go to people who want to take those jobs. Point la ligne. And so we're working hard every day to make sure there's more jobs for Canadians. We're seeing a slight increase in unemployment, which is a natural result of the high interest rates, which are also coming down. And now with inflation at 2% and having come down over 8 months, that's a critical piece to see a turn in the economy. And today we're making good on our promise to actually reduce the numbers in the Temporary Foreign Worker Program and to make sure that the program applies across the country.
Reduce numbers.
Merci beaucoup, and I'll turn now to my colleague.
Mary, they haven't announced anything substantive, just background so far.
Bonjour à tous, merci Randy d'avoir mis la table pour tout le monde. Less than a year ago, we announced 3 big measures when it comes to international students. One, a national cap and a redistribution of the student permits out of a spirit of fairness across provinces and territories. 2, a very important limitation on spousal permits. And 3, as part of making sure that the system is dealing with the fraud that we had seen, a process of letter of acceptances that involves the provinces certifying that the institutions that international students are coming into are indeed those that we see on the applications. Those were very important in addition to some of the measures that I announced in December with respect to the solvency requirements of students that have to come to Canada. Canada is not an inexpensive place to live in. And in addition to the work hour amendments that we have made that limit the work hours to 20 and now coming up 24 hours for students studying full time. We expect students to be doing exactly that.
Studying.
But let's set the table further a little. When you look at the growth that we have seen in people that are temporary residents of Canada, that's something that has grown almost exponentially over the last few years, from about 437,000 individuals in 2019 alone to about 1.2 million in 2023. That comes with consequences, but let's not also forget the importance that immigration generally, the importance of people that are here on a temporary basis has done for the economy. The Bank of Canada has said it, the International Monetary Fund has said it, immigration writ large has been in part responsible for preventing us from going into a recession, has been important for the net growth in the gross domestic product. Again, this has been important, and it's been important to the growth of the country, but I think it's safe to admit that we have allowed certain aspects of this to get overheated, and probably for too long. I made in March an announcement, an important one, to reduce the number of people that are here temporarily from 7% to 5% over the next 3 years. The Bank of Canada rightly highlighted that a number of the measures that we have taken, while important, were not sufficient in order to address that number and to give people the satisfaction that those numbers were going to come down in that period. Today, along with the announcements that Randy is making, we are announcing further measures, specifically, importantly, with respect to international students, and a few other ones that I will go through here shortly. First, I'd like to say that the measures that we've taken with respect to international students, and again, taking a step back, international students and the postgraduate work permits that come with it, occupy about 50% of the temporary workers that are here in Canada. The programs that Randy administers about 10-15%, depending how you're counting. So the growth in the international student space, along with the postgraduate work permits that come with them, the spousal permits that come with them, are ones where we owe it to Canadians, and in the context of an economy where the labor market in some areas is constricting, we need to adjust accordingly. I would say that the measures that we've taken up to now are working. You have seen more than anecdotal evidence that there has been an impact on certain rental markets where students are more prevalent. And this is an announcement in advance of the annual level plan that I know a number
Okay,
of
that's coming, the levels plans.
that I will be announcing on November 1st.
November 1st.
And integrating for the first time ever
Temporary.
a fuller picture of what immigration looks like
Temporary
in our country
caps.
and what we are projecting for the economy, for Canada, for our social cohesion for the next 3 years. So today I am announcing 6 additional measures, and I'll go through them in a little bit of detail because I think that's important. Tout d'abord, nous allons réduire la cible des permis d'études délivrés de 10%
Come on, Minister.
en 2025 par rapport à 2024.
Seriously.
Et nous maintiendrons ce niveau pour 2026. Cela signifie que nous visons à délivrer jusqu'à 437 000 permis d'études en 2025 et 2026, ce qui représenterait une baisse d'environ 36% par rapport à 2023. Deuxièmement, nous allons exempter moins d'étudiants du plafond. Ça veut dire que les gens qui n'étaient pas partis du plafond qu'on avait annoncé en janvier, c'est-à-dire les gens qui étudient à la maîtrise ou au doctorat, vont être pris en ligne de compte dans ce calcul. For those of you that are looking at the numbers, you will see the number I announced is higher as part of the first measure I'm taking, and that's because of measure 2, in which we are carving in master's and PhD programs. So simply put, the international student cap is here to stay. Certains étudiants étrangers sont mieux préparés pour s'intégrer et évidemment réussir au Canada, en particulier les étudiants qui sont titulaires de diplômes d'études supérieures. Ceci répond bien aux besoins du marché du travail canadien. C'est pourquoi nous réservons environ 12% du plafond à ces étudiants et alignerons le programme de permis de travail de post-diplôme sur nos priorités économiques. Over the next 3 years, I think this is important, we expect these changes to yield approximately 300,000 fewer study permits. Ça c'est la troisième mesure, à partir du 1er novembre, nous instaurerons de nouvelles exigences en matière de capacité de compétences linguistiques pour les demandeurs de permis de travail post-diplôme alignés sur les exigences du volet de résidence permanente. A Canadian language benchmark, CLB, level 7 for university graduates and CLB 5 for college graduates will be required for anyone applying for post-graduation work permit on or after November 1st of 2024. We know that people that can speak the language are better equipped to succeed in Canadian society. This is a more stringent requirement that I think is very important if we are going to continue the successful story of integration of some of these people into Canadian society. Fourth, for prospective students applying on or after November 1st, post-graduation work permit eligibility will depend on the level of study. Graduates from bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs will remain eligible for a work permit up to 3 years. These graduates are more likely to acquire transferable knowledge and skills and be able to adapt to changing economic circumstances over the long term. Les diplômés des programmes des collèges publics, par contre, pourront obtenir un permis de travail pour une durée maximale de 3 ans seulement si leur domaine d'études est lié à des pénuries sur le marché du travail au Canada. Ces changements feront en sorte que les diplômés disposent de compétences et des occasions de travail nécessaires pour s'intégrer avec succès dans le marché du travail canadien et éventuellement faire la transition peut-être vers la résidence permanente. Over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 175,000 fewer postgraduate work permits. In the near future, we'll also take further measures to restrict eligibility to spousal open work permits. The fifth measure that I'm announcing today will be to further limit work permit eligibility to spouses of students in doctoral and certain master's select professional programs and certain pilot programs. And over the next 3 years, we expect that measure and these changes to yield approximately 50,000 fewer work permits for the spouses of students groups. And sixth, unrelated to students and postgraduate work permits, will also be limiting work permit eligibility to include only spouses of highly skilled, specialized workers such as C-suite executives, scientists, engineers, lawyers, professors, and technicians, or of workers in sectors where there are those key labor shortages. Spouses of workers in critical sectors like healthcare, construction will also obviously continue to be eligible for those work permits. As a quantitative measure, again, over the next 3 years, we expect these changes to yield approximately 100,000 fewer work permits. Again, I do stress that these are estimates and obviously will need to be tracked closely. Finalement, en conclusion, comme vous le savez, au cours des dernières années, le contexte en immigration a changé. Évidemment, il y a beaucoup de gens qui tentent et qui menacent d'exploiter, qui exploitent nos programmes d'immigration. À cette fin, j'ai demandé, il y a plusieurs mois, à mon sous-ministre d'examiner la façon dont les gens, les visas, qui donnent des visas, prennent des décisions dans ce nouveau contexte, y compris les outils, la formation, l'analyse et les procédures utilisées pour approuver les visas de résidents temporaires. En juin de cette année, après avoir discuté avec mes collègues des provinces, après nos discussions internes, j'ai demandé à mon département de scruter à la loupe cette prise de décision face au volume qui n'est pas soutenable de gens qui désirent venir au Canada. Sachez que arriver au Canada, vouloir venir au Canada est peut-être un rêve, mais c'est un privilège et non un droit. Those measures that we have taken internally to be a little more restrictive on who gets visas, looking at countries where we are seeing people exploiting the visa system, that is to say that those that are claiming for asylum are not legitimate asylum claimants, is a challenge to the system, particularly given the volume of people that are looking to come to Canada. Again, as I said in French, it is a privilege to come to Canada. It is not a right. If you compare the numbers of people that have come in, for example, in one country where we have had some of those challenges from India, we have seen those visas jump down from around 50,000 in January to less than 10,000 in August. Again, these are preliminary numbers, but it is an indicative sign that the measures that we have taken over the summer after discussions with my provincial colleagues are working. There's more work to do. And again, there are a number of measures that we need to take to make sure that when asylum seekers come to this country, they get due process, but that there is no abuse in the system, and it is incumbent on the federal government to act when it controls the levers, particularly at the border. I want to say one final word on what I believe to be, at least at the initial stages, a productive working group with a number of my colleague ministers of labor and immigration, skills training, depending on the title they hold in the province that they represent over the course of the summer. At the Council of the Federation, all of the premiers got together and said that we needed to work as a group to deal with the asylum challenge that this country is facing, and that a lot of countries in our position are facing, particularly with respect to the unsustainable numbers of asylum seekers coming into Quebec and coming into Ontario. All premiers at that time
Here we go.
agreed.
Here we go.
As a parallel process, had already started the idea of a working group with my colleagues from the provinces to deal with this. We asked ourselves a fundamental question as part of our working group: was what does a fair asylum system look like? That started first and foremost with the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that we are doing our role when it comes to bringing and addressing the number of asylum seekers coming into the country, but also the roles of the provinces that have the effective jurisdiction on some of the services that these asylum seekers seek to do their part. And they all agreed to do so. And with the chairmanship of started first and foremost the government of Canada and the government of Nova Scotia, we worked throughout the summer to look at different models of what could this system look like. I'm taking a little bit of time to give you some background because I currently no longer think that working group.
I don't know why we have the feedback.
I don't blame the bureaucrats in question. I don't blame the civil servants of our respective provinces and territories for having done their work. I don't blame my colleague ministers for putting their hearts into it. There was a lot of good faith at that table. But sadly, three particularly conservative ministers have stood up.
I don't know why we have
Nova Scotia,
feedback.
of New Brunswick and Alberta, and decided to weaponize this working group. They took a theoretical number of asylum seekers based on the last year's number of asylum seekers, divided it up by the population.
Yeah, I'm just gonna restart it.
But sadly, three.
Oh, seriously, that's why. Sorry, guys. That's weird. I don't know why it did that.
There was no point in time where anyone said that the federal government was going to impose thousands of asylum seekers on unprepared provinces. I should probably give you the documents that they themselves leaked, because it would probably be quite helpful for your analysis. But this was a productive working group that has been weaponized by three premiers in particular for their re-election or their leadership review. And I think it's really irresponsible. Those provinces come knocking at my door for more immigrants. They are responsible for about 20% of permanent residency numbers through the provincial nominee program. Quebec has the entire control over its permanent residency program based on the Quebec-Canada Accord. And there is a responsible way of doing things. This was not responsible. And they threw their own ministers under the bus. And they've made this productive working group much less productive. It doesn't mean we're giving up. I question the pertinence of this group, given the fact that the documents have been leaked. It's unfortunate, but I do think there was good faith around the table, and we can work on an individual basis with these provinces to see which ones will stand up. There's money on the table. There's over $1 billion that we've committed to making sure that we have a system that makes sense. There are countries in Europe that have a system that makes sense, and indeed the European Union has a system that, while they are facing different challenges than us, at least has some semblance of sense. So. This is about a bunch of premiers who decided to weaponize the issue. Unfortunately, it's undermined the credibility of this committee, and obviously considering dissolving it. That's the last of the formal part of my presentation, but Randy and I are pleased to take your questions, which I'm sure you have a few of.
Thank you, ministers. Yeah, we'll turn to the question and answer portion of our event today.
Okay, we'll go through this and we'll listen to what the questions are, and then we'll stick around and we'll answer your questions.
Hi, Minister. I'm hoping you can clarify a little bit about whether you're still intending to decrease international student enrollments by a third, because I believe that was the initial announcement, and the math is a little bit hard to follow in this current announcement as it relates to the previous one.
Yeah, Majid, pertinent question. What we did is we established a cap, and we said, provinces, you deal with it the way you want to deal with. And we've been asking provinces, indeed begging provinces, to actually put a little rigor into their international student system, failing which we've decided to step up and do it. There's a cap, so provinces can go under, like Quebec and Alberta, or they can consistently struggle with being over it. And I think that is where we kind of come in and play our role. We established a cap in January because of the recruiting impact that this cap has had. We are seeing a lot of institutions coming under that cap. Now, they will adjust their behavior. This is a turbulent year for post-secondary institutions. I certainly acknowledge that. The turbulence is something I think we need to deal with, and what they want is predictability. So what we're saying is the cap that we established, whether it's achieved or not in an aggregate level by every province put together, I don't control that, but that cap is getting reduced another 10%. We assume behavior will adjust. I've told post-secondary institutions several times that they need to adjust their recruitment practices. I have told them that the cost of acquisition of international students is certain to increase. So if they adjust their practices, get quality students, make sure those students have the means to stay in here, that's fine. But when it comes to the numerical amount of students that come into this province, come into this country, we have fixed that cap at what it was in January, folded in master's and PhD students, taken that number and reduced it by 10% for the 2025 and 2026 years. So whether those numbers pan out is not exactly within my control. All we control is the upward limit that it doesn't seem like people are pushing against at this point.
And follow up on a different subject. If either of you have seen the video of Jagmeet Singh from yesterday with that altercation outside of the outside of West Block, I'd be interested in your thoughts on it.
People on Parliament Hill and in our legislatures are called to serve. Regardless of your political stripes, you're here. People on this hill are here to serve Canadians. And we don't agree always on the policies or the approaches they take, but everybody should have the ability to come to work and walk around Parliament Hill free from harassment. And what happened the other day was not fair to Mr. Singh. And quite frankly, I think he handled it well. But we have to do more work to make sure that people on Parliament Hill, including our staffers, are protected. I have shared with the press gallery before that I have experienced this kind of harassment at my home. I've experienced it at my own barbecue earlier. It's not pleasant, and it's something that we're all having to get used to. But to not have a secure parliamentary precinct that needs to be fixed. And I think Mr. Singh was right to defend himself.
Much the same way. I think he has like a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and stuff. Like, so he shouldn't have to get a purple belt in jiu-jitsu to feel safe. And a lot of us are threatened. It's gotten worse over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And as much as I was proud of Jagmeet standing up to this guy, it shouldn't have gone to that. There's a bunch of knuckleheads walking around the hill with their own agenda. I think the sad part in this is that Pierre Poilievre continues to play footsies with these guys. His own members of parliament are out laughing it up and drinking with these guys. And that's it's not this isn't an insinuation, this is fact. Canadians need to see that in a clear fashion and see where it's coming from. I think guys like Pierre Poilievre need to repudiate this disgusting behavior by people that support him.
Like, why is the MP for St. Albert Edmonton, Michael Cooper, out there having cocktails with these guys? Like, these people have been arrested before.
This is where I've got an issue with it getting into politics now.
He should answer to his constituents for that.
Just stick to the message, guys.
Pamela Almeida Sumeo from Market News International, please.
Hello.
That was a plant
I'm
question.
Mr. Miller. So the Bank of Canada a few weeks ago suggested that the government will not meet its targets for pulling back on immigration and slowing population growth. Are you seeing signs that the government is having difficulty meeting its objectives?
I think that, the measures, and they were right to say that at the time, because we had told them that our measures were just reflecting what we'd already told them. So the measures that we announced, that Randy and I have announced over the course of the last 3 months, were not sufficient to meet what we had announced as a reduction of temporary residents from 7 to 5%. These measures today, according to our statistics, and we'll have to monitor them closely, will meet those targets. The Bank of Canada is independent, it can analyze it itself, and these are the announcements that they've been looking for. They clearly said in their release that they were looking for the further announcements that we've been working for over the summer. So the suite of measures and the projections that my department has put together are expected to meet those projections, and if we do things right, perhaps even exceed them. But again, we have to be very careful how we're adjusting these things because it can have an impact on the economy, and we don't want to overcorrect because that has effects as well.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, Canada's internal birth rate is at record lows. If we're slowing down immigration, is there a plan to find other ways to keep the population stable in the long run?
Asking me to tell people to have babies, that's way out of my comfort zone. But I think the reality is we all face, as countries in our position, challenges with birth rates. That is part of the reason why we need immigration, and we are facing sort of generational challenges as opposed to electoral challenges. When as the Minister of Immigration, that is sometimes the top issue in my head. Even were we to have a baby boom today, it would take 20 some years to make these young babies productive members of the economy, which is probably the last way you look at them when you have birth. It's a beautiful event, but that's reality. So we would still need immigrants regardless, even if we had a massive baby boom for the next 20 years. We will need that. I think, as I announced the Levels Plan in the 1st of November, that is a question that we need to address. The measures that we take are ones that are very important. This is a country built on immigration, but it's also one that needs to take into account a number of factors that Canadians have told us to take into account. I did a strategic review in my department over a year ago. These are things that came up repeatedly, and they're increasingly coming up in the public discourse. So the reality is that we have a particular view on immigration. We do have a responsibility to get it right, getting the number right, to make sure that our measures are not recessionary in nature, and make sure that we are addressing these generational issues, which is the low birth rate. I think some of the measures that the government has taken with respect to childcare, getting more women into the economy, being able to have someone take care of their kids, the child family benefit, are sources of that ability to be able to create and foster an environment where it is affordable to raise children. But again, right now, look, I got 3 of them, and I get a good paycheck. It is a challenge for people with children. We just need to make it more favorable because we can't get out of this without immigration, and we can't have a birth rate that we see other countries going down as well with low immigration. You have countries like South Korea that are facing a wall and some existential issues if they don't address things in the next few years. Would not like to wind up in that position.
To put some numbers to what Mark's just said, as the guy that looks at the labor data and the economic growth data, 99% of economic growth in Canada is reliant on newcomers to keep coming to this country, full stop. And so the core of the Levels Plan is critical, and Mark and it's a delicate balancing act to get it right with the comprehensive approach that he's mapped out. But there's something else. By 2032, our entire growth as a country, population growth, will be based on newcomers coming to this country. And this is also against a backdrop. I'll go into a sector of the economy right now. 400,000 skilled trades workers will retire by 2032. It's the great tsunami. It's just happening. Demographics is destiny. The other piece, though, is that with all the building that we're doing and the things that we want to achieve, we've got another demand of about 300,000 more skilled trades workers. So you can see that we have a challenge of making sure we have enough people with the right skills to get the right training to fit into the jobs that are needed so that we can grow the country. And that's why Mark and I and our departments are working so closely together, and we have broken down silos between our ministries so that immigration and labor market needs are very closely tied together.
And in the past, it wasn't like that, you guys. Those two departments did not communicate very well.
Ma question était plus pour vous. Vous en avez parlé au début de ce working group sur les demandeurs d'asile. J'aimerais ça démêler quelques affaires parce que vous aviez dit qu'il y avait des faits erronés. Qu'est-ce qui est sur la table exactement? Est-ce que c'est effectivement d'en répartir au prorata de chaque province? Je comprends peut-être les chiffres ne sont pas les bons, mais est-ce que le concept est le bon? Et on entend beaucoup les provinces qui en ont pas envie. Est-ce qu'il y en a des provinces qui sont ouvertes à le faire?
This link here is the overview of what they announced.
En ce moment, là?
Je dirais qu'il y a des provinces qui sont intéressées au concept. Il y en a qui veulent rien savoir pour des raisons, comme j'ai dit très clairement en anglais, pour des raisons partisanes puis malheureuses. Ce qu'on a, j'ai quasiment le goût de vous couler l'information, ou de vous le donner carrément, parce que c'est facile. C'était des propositions, on leur a dit, puis ils le savaient. voici de quoi aurait l'air la situation des demandeurs d'asile si ces gens-là étaient répartis de façon par population des provinces respectives. C'est très banal comme mathématique. Certains premiers ministres qui sont partis avec ça, pour eux autres, Justin Trudeau allait tout imposer sur eux, puis on ne voulait pas de ça, puis on pas de demandeurs d'asile, etc. C'est trois nonos conservateurs, le premier ministre Houston, le premier ministre Higgs, puis le premier ministre Smith, qui sont emportés. Ils ont peut-être regardé les élections américaines, puis ils sont inspirés. La réalité est tout autre. Ce qu'on a proposé, c'était voici la réalité, voici ce à quoi l'Ontario fait face, voici ce à quoi le Québec fait face, de façon consentante. S'il y avait une province, puis des demandeurs d'asile consentants qui voulaient quand travailler dans une juridiction, ils ont besoin de ces gens-là avec une certaine spécialité. Voici où on pourrait les placer, voici où on pourrait les loger, et ça aurait l'air d'une répartition consentante où le gouvernement fédéral jouait un rôle de collaboration. Pour l'instant, puis ça commence à diminuer, mais la plupart de ces gens-là arrivent à l'aéroport Pearson ou Trudeau. De là, dépendant du type de personne, ils se dirigent plus souvent que non vers Toronto ou à Montréal. On ne va pas les forcer à faire quoi que ce soit. Alors, on ne peut pas les forcer, je dis très clairement qu'on ne va pas les traiter comme du bétail, mais de façon consentante, s'il y avait des gens qui arrivent et disent ben, on est demandeurs d'asile, on a besoin d'une province qui va nous épauler, qui va nous appuyer, qui va nous donner une job et un logement. Est-ce qu'il y en a une qui dit oui? Alors là, c'est là où on demande des provinces de lever leurs mains. On a des discussions qui sont en cours, alors je veux pas trahir cette confidentialité.
Yeah, I know the volume's
Voilà,
low,
avec
you
la
guys.
sortie
We'll
de
recap
cette
everything.
liste, ça va être plus difficile parce que ça va devenir un enjeu encore politique, puis du capital politique qui se fait sur le dos des demandeurs d'asile. Alors, c'était jamais une question de forcer les demandeurs d'asile à coups de milliers sur une province en particulier. C'est de la foutaise pour des raisons électoralistes dans ces trois cas.
Mais en même temps, j'essaie de comprendre. OK, vous ne voulez pas les forcer, mais vous avez aussi dit que si personne ne veut rien savoir, il y a des leviers. C'est quoi ces leviers-là? Ça sonne un peu comme les forcer. S'il y a des leviers.
C'est pas les forcer, c'est les leviers. L'immigration, c'est un choix. C'est un choix très important.
It's not all in French, you guys.
Chaque fois que je les rencontre, ils viennent me voir pour davantage de pouvoir dans leur système, leur programme de nomination provinciale. Le programme de nomination provinciale, c'est un système en vertu duquel il y a 100 000 résidents permanents qui sont répartis aux provinces, puis ont le choix de faire ce qu'ils veulent avec. Ils viennent me voir à chaque année pour davantage de ces places-là. Alors, je me demande, s'ils refusent d'assumer leurs responsabilités, est-ce qu'ils auront droit à l'avenir à ces places-là? Il va falloir en discuter. Il va falloir discuter des privilèges et des obligations qui relèvent de leur rôle comme province.
So Minister Miller is talking about will the PNPs get the same number of allocations if the provinces are not willing to be collaborative?
Il y a beaucoup de provinces qui ont levé leurs mains pour accueillir les Ukrainiens et voilà qu'ils me disent ben non, on n'en veut plus. Mais par contre, envoyez-moi ce type de personne, avec l'excuse que ça pourrait avoir un impact sur le système de santé. Ma dernière vérification, un demandeur d'asile en santé vis-à-vis un médecin en santé qui se présente à un hôpital a le même impact sur le système de santé. Alors, une certaine hypocrisie dans tout ça.
David Thurton, CBC News.
Thanks for taking this question. Wanted to ask you some remarks that we heard from the Indian government. They have leveled accusations that over 170 of its citizens who've gone to Canada on student visas have died. That's the highest number, they say, than anywhere in the world. Of course, this is over a period of time. These more than 170 of Indian citizens. Any response to this, and what are you doing about this situation?
David, I won't respond directly to the Indian government, but it's clear that the people that come here, like anyone else, we got to take care of them. It's been pretty well documented that students, because of the precarious position they're in, whether it's housing or others, have impacts on their health. Some Some provinces are better than others in giving sort of medical help, but there is an impact on students' mental health and all students' mental health. There's a young core of the population that's going through some important changes in their lives, and someone that's coming from a foreign country is often feeling very lonely. So, tragic to see anyone die. It's a general, and I've made this time and time again in a number of my announcements, but the mental health of these kids is important, and we shouldn't be demonizing them. They came here to get the best education, one of the best educations in the world, and the institutions that are making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 off them need to support them better, and we need to be there, provinces need to be there.
Okay, just as a follow-up, I'm gonna ask you about something else. It's about the news that we've heard earlier today that your Quebec lieutenant, Pablo Rodriguez, is resigning after that election loss in Montreal. I'm just wondering if we could get your reaction to that, Mr. Miller.
I have none at this time. His future is for him to speak about. I can speak confidently to the fact that any decision taken by Pablo Rodriguez currently has absolutely nothing to do with the results in La Salle. I just know him. I mean, I've known him for.
All right.
I mean, no one really knows someone in life, but I do know Pablo well. What's that? I'm 100% confident that any decision about his own future has zero to do with the loss in La Salle.
Okay, Toria Isri, Global.
Are you considering further cuts to the number of permanent residents and available slots for family reunification?
For November 1st for that.
Okay. In other words,
Something you're considering?
I will. Well, I'm considering lots of things, but any reduction, there's no discussion that's been had at cabinet, so I'm only one of the voices here. We're putting together a number of propositions with respect to what the levels plan looks like for the next 3 years, and those choices will be ones that we have to decide in cabinet. But you'll know on November 1st.
And then you spoke about this a bit in French, but what recourse does Ottawa have for premiers who, in your words, are weaponizing this working group and the distribution of asylum seekers?
I mean, they've voluntarily blown up the working group. It was helpful. I think the fact that they're doing that for their own political futures is disappointing, probably disgraceful, depending on your view on the matter. There's responsibility that comes with being a minister of immigration federally or provincially. Some premiers are their own ministers of immigration, so they take it that seriously. But some of them feel that some menu they can come take and knock on the door of the federal government and say, I need 100,000 more people for this, that, and that. The 20% of the permanent residency spaces are allotted to the provinces at their discretion for permanent residents. They keep asking me for more. I got a letter from Daniel Smith wanting more. I got a letter from my counterpart in Ontario wanting more. They want more, but they don't want the burden that Ontario and Quebec are facing. I don't want to skirt the federal responsibility here.
Please don't, Minister. Please don't.
The system is a disciplined one and a fair one. But once someone is here seeking asylum, they need to be treated like humans, and that requires the participation of the provinces. So we talked about the provincial nominee program is one that is discretionary, and for those provinces that are responsible, perhaps they need more positions. And if they're responsible with respect to asylum seekers, they deserve credit for that. There's money attached to it. There's about $1 billion and change on the table. So a lot of these disingenuous tweets or statements said we won't do it without money. They knew that there was money on the table based on the documents that they leaked, if they even read them. And they need to look at them better, or at least talk to their ministers of immigration that I had a productive working relationship with. And they've gone and blown it up for their own purposes.
Tora, as Minister for Alberta, I want to chime in and just say I was very disturbed by the Premier's comments. Albertans have really big hearts. I grew up with our province welcoming people from Vietnam, welcoming people that were displaced by Idi Amin, the Ismaili people. In the 90s, a whole bunch of Somalis settled in Alberta. And thanks to Mark and Sean before him, we have a whole bunch of Ukrainians that have fled the war, the illegal war, started by Russia, who have made their homes temporarily in Alberta. And we took a lot of Syrian refugees as well. Alberta is a welcoming place. We're a growing province. The province has the ability to build all the schools, all the hospitals it needs. It has posted 2 years of record surpluses. Mark has been very clear that Alberta taking its fair share of asylum seekers comes with compensation from the federal government, and Albertans have big hearts. And to Mark's point, there's a leadership review coming up for Danielle Smith. She's playing to her base, and it's very disturbing.
Okay. Anne-Caroline Desplanques, Journal de Montréal.
As you can see, politics is infused in immigration, 100%.
Beaucoup de mois que le système et les entreprises, les premiers ministres réclament resserrement des mesures d'immigration. Pourquoi est-ce que ça prend tellement de temps avant que vous le fassiez?
Ben de un, c'est pas... ça relève du récent passé que plusieurs premiers ministres de province, et puis j'ai encore des lettres à l'appui, me demandent davantage d'immigration. Comme je vous l'ai dit, j'ai des lettres des premiers ministres des provinces, j'ai les résultats des rencontres que j'ai eues avec eux dans le contexte de nos rencontres multilatérales, où ils me réclament plus d'immigrants. En ce qui a trait aux demandeurs d'asile, d'un, c'est un phénomène global.
For those who are watching, Alicia and I will take time to break all of this down. The link on the screen, if you don't speak French, has an overview of the announcements. So you can go to that link and then you can educate yourself and then come back and let's talk about this. There's a little bit of politics being infused into this, and there's lots of tension between the provinces and the federal government, but we'll talk about that as well.
Parmi ceux qu'on contrôle, je pense qu'on peut être très fier de l'arrivée des Ukrainiens, des Syriens, des Afghans, mais ça vient avec des conséquences sur l'abordabilité, sur la capacité de logement. Et c'est là où, je pense, le bas blesse, où les premiers ministres des provinces viennent nous voir pour dire, ben, écoutez, on a des défis, on a des challenges, donnez-nous plus de responsabilités. C'est un va-et-vient. Les mesures que j'ai prises en ce qui a trait au visa mexicain étaient très importantes, attendues. Ça a eu un effet, une diminution de 80% des demandeurs d'asile provenant du Mexique, donc ça a marché. Mais en ce qui a trait au... Il ne faut pas oublier que dans les mesures qu'on annonce au niveau fédéral, il y en a à peu près, dans le contexte, par exemple, des étudiants internationaux, des permis de travail postsecondaire qui viennent avec, c'est des bénéfices qui vont directement aux provinces, que ce soit dans les frais de scolarité ou les taxes que ces gens payent en travaillant 24 heures, 20 heures et moins. Donc, c'est des bénéfices aux provinces. Le travail de travailleurs temporaires à bas salaire, c'en est un qui est choisi par les provinces. Puis les provinces elles-mêmes, le Québec, à titre d'exemple, a triplé ce programme dans sa juridiction.
Just click on this link if you're looking for the French version of the announcement. And in the top right corner, all you have to do is click on the FR and it'll convert it to French.
Ce qu'on nous demande, puis c'est ce qu'on demande aux provinces, il y a plusieurs vérificateurs généraux au niveau des étudiants internationaux qui ont dit coup sur coup que l'Ontario devrait réglementer le secteur avec plus d'assiduité, puis ils ne l'ont pas fait. Alors, c'est un peu de mauvaise foi de virer de bord puis me dire qu'il y a des demandeurs d'asile soudainement qui apparaissent au Canada, tandis qu'ils les génèrent au sein de leurs propres institutions qui gèrent eux-mêmes. Vous voyez le record d'étudiants internationaux qui sont eux-mêmes des demandeurs d'asile. Il y a de la responsabilité. Il y a de la responsabilité au niveau du fédéral. Et puis, ce qu'on ne veut surtout pas faire, c'est de faire un ajustement qui cause un effet récessionniste. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle on y va de façon mesurée. Les annonces aujourd'hui sont des annonces qui sont ambitieuses. Puis, je ne pense pas aussi qu'il faut attendre. Puis, il faut s'attendre à des résultats du jour au lendemain. On essaie de freiner un très gros paquebot. Ça prend du temps. Simply in English, and I wanted to add this for those crunching the numbers, that I would say cautiously that we shouldn't expect to see significant results until I would say the second quarter of next year. This is like slowing down a big ship, and it takes some time to slow down and to turn, and it will take time. But these measures, I think, are important. The measures that we're seeing and that we took in January with respect to students are, at least anecdotally, with some data to support it, affecting rents, for example, in Surrey or elsewhere, or in university towns. So this is positive, but we need to continue along this. And I was just saying, as I said in French, it wasn't so long ago, a couple of years ago, that provinces were crying to us for more people, more permissiveness after COVID. Like I said, we probably let this get a little overheated for too long, but there have been benefits from economy, including avoiding 2 recessions.
Vous avez parlé d'éviter l'effet récessionniste, mais la croissance du pays est au ralenti. Le président de la Banque nationale dit que l'immigration est responsable. Trop plein d'immigration qui a arrêté trop lentement est responsable en partie de cette croissance au ralenti. L'emploi, ça va de mal en pis, surtout chez les jeunes. Est-ce que vous prenez une certaine responsabilité? Est-ce que l'immigration a une certaine responsabilité dans ce phénomène, dans la situation économique?
Je pense absolument, comme ministre responsable, il faut toujours prendre la responsabilité. Responsabilité de l'état des choses, mais la responsabilité d'agir aussi. Puis c'est ce qu'on fait aujourd'hui. Faut aussi se souvenir, puis vous pouvez même consulter les documents de la Banque nationale à l'appui. Il y a un temps où on demandait plus et plus davantage de gens. Il y a d'autres économistes qui ont une autre perspective. Je ne vais pas me rentrer dans un débat en point de presse sur les perspectives de ces gens-là, que je respecte d'ailleurs. Mais c'est clair qu'il faut agir avec les circonstances qui existent aujourd'hui.
Avec les mesures que nous avons déjà mises sur la table en ce qui concerne le programme de travailleurs étrangers temporaires, on va avoir une réduction d'au moins 10 000 personnes qui vont venir au Canada. Ça, c'est le minimum. Et donc, si on enlève le programme d'agriculture primaire, ça fait une réduction de 70 000 personnes sur un total de 170 000. C'est une réduction énorme et nous le faisons parce que moi, je veux que ces emplois vont aux étudiants, vont aux jeunes, vont aux aînés, vont aux nouveaux arrivants qui sont déjà installés ici. Ça, c'est très clair. L'autre élément qui est très important, et c'est très important qu'on les pousse à faire leur travail, c'est que nous versons 2,8 milliards de dollars par année aux provinces pour la formation des gens, s'y inclut les jeunes. Et s'il y a des provinces qui n'ont pas de stratégie pour former les jeunes, c'est sur eux. Ils reçoivent l'argent de nous et il faut être des partenaires en ce qui concerne la formation des jeunes. Point la ligne.
Votre 170 000, c'est pour le programme.
Come on, give us something in English.
C'est à travers toutes les mesures qu'on vient de mentionner. Oui, absolument.
That's all the time we have today, so we're going to conclude it there. I'm sorry.
Okay, stay tuned, guys. We're going to break this down.
You're good?
I can go through the French.
You can? Okay. Your staff are just...
Not over yet.
I'm trying to get
We have question periods.
All right, so... Ryan Tumulty, National Post.
Ms. Rossner, you talked a little bit about the shortage in skilled trades that the country is facing. If you look in the high wage category of the temporary foreign workers, there are lots of people in carpentry, there are mechanics, etc. Is there an imbalance that is broader than just these programs in what Canadian institutions are training and graduating people into which jobs? Is there a serious problem here in the jobs and the education that is coming forward and the actual demands of the Canadian economy?
That's a really big question, Ryan, and I'm going to give you the shortest answer I can. Look, this country, and I think there's been a culture of not valuing the trades. And if we want to build the country to the way we want to build the country, we have to esteem the trades earlier in life. Almost my entire extended family are tradespeople. They're electricians, they're pipe fitters. They work with their hands, their hearts, and their heads. And yet, somehow, too many tradespeople for too long have felt somehow like they're second-class citizens. Those days are over. If you are in the skilled trades, you're going to make good money, you're going to have a long career, you're going to be part of the very functioning middle class, you're probably going to have a unionized job, and that's a good thing for the country. And so I work with a counterpart like Matt Jones, how do we get more skills trades? I worked with Jamie Moses in Manitoba to do the same thing. This is a systemic generational call to action to get more people in the skilled trades. And it's an attitudinal shift that goes right to the school level. When guidance counselors are looking at you and saying, oh, you should be going down the professional track, as opposed to taking a very serious look at what the skills trades could mean for that student, that is a disservice to our future and to the kids that are in our school system.
Yeah, and then just following up, your government now faces a confidence vote next week. One of the conditions that I know the Bloc has said that they are looking for is giving more control of the immigration system, especially around asylum, to Quebec. Is that something that you think you would consider in exchange for their support on a confidence vote?
Not a chance.
Okay, we'll squeeze in one from Hélène Bouzetti as well.
Monsieur Miller, j'aimerais juste revenir sur cette question des demandeurs d'asile dont vous avez parlé des 3 conservateurs qui ne veulent pas. Qu'en est-il des 5 autres?
I'm surprised they don't do real-time translation.
Que vous avez reçu d'eux et qu'est-ce que vous attendez d'eux? Qu'est-ce que vous l'avez demandé? Je sais que la question a été posée, mais la réponse n'est pas super claire.
Ben, j'attends, parce que la réponse est à venir, Hélène. C'est un groupe de travail qui continuait de bien œuvrer. On a des discussions avec certains premiers ministres. Il y a un certain intérêt. Il y en a un notamment qui s'en va en élection. Le premier ministre Lévy, notamment. Alors, il va falloir attendre les résultats de cette élection. Mais il y en a d'autres qui seraient intéressés. Je ne veux pas parler en public de ça. J'ai horreur de ça. J'aimerais voir un groupe qui travaille comme du monde, puis qui consent à accepter des gens qui sont dans une situation assez difficile. Si la situation se corse davantage, évidemment, on a des leviers au fédéral, mais ce n'est pas une question d'aller transplanter des gens, de les déraciner d'où ils sont, puis de les mettre en masse dans une province qui n'est pas préparée. Là, ce qu'on demande, on a déjà un réseau d'hôtels à travers le Canada qui fonctionne correctement, mais c'est pas idéal, ça coûte trop cher. Les gens sont mal encadrés. Et puis, c'est difficile de le faire cavalier seul, le gouvernement fédéral, avec parfois l'accord d'une ville. Ça prend le commitment d'une province avec toutes les ressources sur lesquelles ils ont une mainmise, la juridiction effective, soit en santé, accompagnement. On va leur compenser, bien évidemment, mais ça prend leur accord. Donc, la question, c'est, je pense qu'il y a 3 premiers ministres qui ont dit que c'était sans leur consentement, puis c'était ridicule, puis ils ont instrumentalisé un bon groupe de travail. Mais on va continuer, là, on ne baisse pas les bras, puis il y a toujours moyen de convaincre. Alors moi, j'ai quand même espoir, mais évidemment, vu cette sortie très opportuniste de ces 3 gens-là, le groupe de travail est beaucoup moins productif qu'il était avant.
Mais qu'est-ce que vous dites alors au gouvernement Legault, je parle juste du Québec ici, là, mais qui veut avoir cette répartition? Vous nous dites on ne peut pas les forcer, ce n'est pas du bétail, le travail continue. Qu'est-ce que vous leur dites? C'est quoi les chances que quelque chose aboutisse à ce niveau?
Désolé de vous interrompre. Je pense qu'on a un devoir, peu importe le résultat de ce groupe de travail, de réduire le volume de gens qui viennent ici au Canada réclamer l'asile, surtout les gens qui viennent ici et qui n'ont pas gain de cause ou qui viennent de pays sources auxquels on accorde trop de visas et vraiment de resserrer nos règles d'accord de visa. On a une responsabilité fédérale, peu importe les résultats du groupe, ça peut être le plus positif possible. Si on a toujours ce volume, c'est un volume qui est insoutenable. Ce que je dirais au gouvernement Legault, je lui dirais directement, j'ai commencé, il y a un nouveau ministre, Jean-François Roberge, auquel il faut donner la chance. Je lui communiquerai directement, mais je comprends leur position, je comprends également la position dans laquelle se trouve l'Ontario.
Okay, that concludes today's press conference. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you,
Okay,
ministers.
thank you guys for tuning in. All right, let's shift now and let's try to break this down. I know there's been a ton of people that have been offering a lot of different comments, and I haven't been pulling them up just because a lot of the questions and the interchange was in French. Those of you who are wondering, well, what the heck does all of this mean? I want you to post your comments. We're going to take some time to kind of break it down. the one thing that we know, Alicia, is that this is unbelievably polarizing. So this whole issue across the country, like I said at the beginning of our live Q&A earlier, before we went live with this, immigration has become somewhat of a wedge issue, and probably clearly a wedge issue. And this is what you're seeing with the provinces. Alberta, I think New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, I think are the three provinces that the minister was referring to, where there's a lot of political tension. And no, the Conservatives they're not aligned with the policy of the Liberals and vice versa. And unfortunately, immigration is one of the most politicized areas of government. And the decisions about who comes into Canada affects everything. It affects the whole makeup of the country. What kind of country are we? It affects the whole world of politics, who people vote for. All of those things play a role. And so none of the decisions, don't be deceived, none of the decisions that our federal government are making are removed 100% from politics. Politics is always at play. And in like manner, the decisions that the provinces make, especially this unnecessary headbutting that's happening with the provinces and the feds, to a large extent, it absolutely is political. Political leaders want to get reelected. And I just want to give just a little bit of an overview so people understand the environment that we're in right now. And Alicia and I do our very, very best not to make these live streams political. I probably wade into it a little bit more than Alicia would like me to wade in. But the reality is right now we have a minority government. So the Liberal Party is a minority. They won enough to get elected, but not to control the cabinet without the support of another party. And that was the NDP. Jagmeet Singh, they had entered into, what was it called, the Supply and Confidence Agreement, I think, where basically they would support them, and that allows them to lead. But recently, the NDP pulled out of that. So we're in a situation where next week, I think it is, there's going to be what they call a confidence vote. And if the majority of Parliament are not in support of the government, then it can lead to a snap election. Now, there's an election that's coming regardless next year, but depending on how this plays out and whether or not the Liberals can survive that, it will play a big role in, obviously, where we go as a country, let alone immigration. So this is what's happening in the background. And so everybody's arming their camps, they're posturing, they're doing everything they can to figure it out. Obviously, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives would love nothing more than to have an election, a snap election, because they're polling really high in the country right now. And so they're arming every resource, every asset they have to try to succeed in this confidence vote. This basically no confidence is what they want, so that they can get an election. But the timing of this announcement is not like, please understand, this all kind of plays a role in all of this. And so I think sometimes it's really easy to blame parties and ministers, and I'm guilty of it myself, when you're looking in hindsight. And he's right, the minister's right. When it was through the pandemic and shortly after the pandemic, all of the provinces, there were very few that weren't clamoring for people. And so the Liberal government gave them what they wanted. And the minister acknowledged the issue. Now, I sometimes there's wordsmithing that's involved, and I did make a note of it. I'm trying to remember how he actually described it. But let's see, what did he say here? Oh, yes. He said, yes, we did let things get a little overheated for too long. And that's code for they probably should have instituted some measures to reduce the number of temporary residents before it reached this stage. But he's also right. People are here, and we as a country have an obligation to not just throw them under the bus and to take care of them. And if people make asylum claims, and he talked about trying to tighten it up and make sure that those who are making fraudulent claims are identified and removed, that's our focus. But when there are vulnerable people and people that are here in Canada, we as Canadians, as a people, as a country, do not just turn them out or throw them under the bus. Like, we don't do that, but we learn. And this is one of the things, like even in a tweet, Alicia, I responded to something the minister had said where he was, it's hard because politics can be kind of mean at times. And I said, look, at the end of the day, the federal government has to be responsible for the decisions that they've made that have gotten us to this point. And the best thing in the world any government can do is take responsibility and not deflect for the decisions that they made. And then they're in a better position to then call out the other parties and the other side, when the time comes for them to have to make decisions that are not going to please everyone. So just so everybody understands, this is where we're at. And I don't want to express my views politically or otherwise, but the reality is my hope would be that people who do not have pathways to permanent residence will honor the temporary status of their stay, and that they will return home and not just make frivolous refugee claims. People that genuinely need access to protection, I hope they do make those claims. We as a firm don't do asylum, we don't do refugee. We're here to support people in their journeys as much as possible, but it's really, really important that people understand that we're a country we should be a country of kindness and a country of compassion and a country of understanding, a country of forgiveness, a country of collaboration, and not a country of division. And the media plays into this, politics plays into it, but we don't have to. We don't. So as we go forward here, I'm not gonna screen comments. I'm not gonna pick the ones that I think are just what I want people to hear. I'm gonna go through, we're gonna talk about this, we're gonna pull up people's comments as harsh as they are. People have very strong views, but if we can't have open discussion, open dialogue, then that's where the real problem is. And so, yeah. So Alicia, I'll stop talking. And what are your thoughts with all of this?
So the nice thing is I can understand French. Mark, am I echoing for you?
Nope, you're good. You're okay.
I'm just echoing for me, which is really
Okay, try. How's that? Is that better?
I don't have an echo.
I turned off my one mic. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. It's never good to hear yourself saying exactly what you just said 2 seconds ago. So, all right. So the first thing I want to recap what they actually said, what they were discussing, and part of it was in French, part of it was in English. And so for those of you who don't speak French, it might be a little bit confusing. But basically, they started off talking about the fact that the changes to the labor market impact assessment stream that are going to be coming into effect on September 26th will also apply to the Quebec programs. And so that's something that they had not said before. And so they're tightening things up. They're making sure that all census metropolitan areas that have higher unemployment than 6% will be covered by it. And I did see in one of the other, when we were on our live, people were asking, well, how do we know what those are? And so if you search up, and I can maybe send the link to Mark here, but you can actually find what the unemployment numbers are.
Yeah.
And so they have actually data sets for August of 2024, and I'm just sending this over to Mark right now. Mark, I just put it in our chat.
Okay.
But it does give an infographic, and so that's a nice one to use because it shows clearly which cities have unemployment rates of higher than 6%. And so what will happen for across Quebec as well as across Canada as of September 26th is that companies who are hiring workers in low wage occupations, and this is something that's a little bit technical, but in order to figure out what a low wage occupation is, great. So Mark has got that. This is the March numbers. I think there's also an August numbers, but I might have scrolled away from that. So there is an updated March one as well, or a August one from the March one. And sorry, I can put that into the chat. But what's happening is that they're keeping census data regularly, pretty much every month. And so people will have to go, employers will have to go and see what is the census data to show what the unemployment rate is. Sorry, Mark, here's the right link. So we can see that as of August 2024, last month, any of those top countries, so Regina, London, Ottawa, Gatineau, Hamilton, Montreal, Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, St. Catharines, Niagara, Calgary, Oshawa, Toronto, Edmonton, and Windsor, all of those cities have, or regions, have higher unemployment rates than 6%. Therefore, zero LMIAs are going to be processed under the low wage category for all of those areas unless that work happens to be in a in-demand occupation like primary agriculture or perhaps construction. They didn't really specifically say how they were going to determine that. So that's what the first part of the news conference was about these announcements that they made to changes to the low-wage temporary foreign worker program. It is going to be capped at 10% of the company's workforce, proportionate to how many Canadians they already have working in their company. And also the duration of that LMIA work permit will be down from 2 years to 1 year, and that's going to apply across the board. So that's the first thing they were talking about. They were talking overall about the numbers of immigrants that Canada has had and temporary foreign workers. And we know that they are now integrating the number of temporary foreign workers into their levels plan for the very first time, and they are reducing that amount. And so both of them spoke to the fact that the Bank of Canada was crunching some numbers, and they said, hey, the measures so far, because immigration has taken a number of measures already this year to reduce the number of temporary residents in Canada. And that applies to students, it applies to spouses of students, it applies to workers and people who don't have permanent resident status, basically. So they said, Bank of Canada said the number of workers that we have, students, everything else, based on the measures you've implemented thus far, are not going to reduce the numbers to the percentage you wanted. So what they've said is they want that temporary resident number to go from 7% down to 5% over the next 3 years. So they are continuing to do that by implementing further measures. So that's what they're doing.
And the big issue too, the big issue is that, when the government makes announcements, people expect that the results are going to happen next month.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and once again, it's easy from a political standpoint to take those announcements and say, aha, look, it's a month later and nothing has changed. Or, for instance, we've seen reports, well, the overall student numbers have actually increased from when you made the announcement. So the minister identified that, these changes will take time. And their goal is, yes, to get it down to 5%. And, they were referencing, I think it was the Bank of Canada. I can't remember who had said, well, you guys are not on track, right? Like you're based on our data, you're not on track. And they said, okay, yes, we understand this, but these new policies we're implementing today, and they went through and listed, it's going to reduce, the numbers of, in different categories, 50,000, I made notes of all the different areas. So for example, it's going to, like with the caps on spousal work permits, it's going to, reduce by whatever it was, 50,000, by this time. And the minister said Q2 by 2025, next year, is when we should start to see these things happening. But at the same time, when you're making these announcements, you need to be clear, you need to be transparent. And they never really said much about when they expected these, the actual results to be visible. So then, of course, people are there pointing out your measures aren't working. And so, so I think to a large extent, we'll have to wait and see. It'll take some time.
Yeah, and this is the thing to keep in mind. And this is why they were talking about birth rates. They were talking about the economic impact of immigration. They were talking about the fact that we simply do not have a population base, and there are aging Canadians who are retiring, who are leaving the workforce, and we do not have a birth replacement rate in order to be able to sustain the level of economic growth that we would like. And so this is where you have to have long-range planning. And so we know that the changes that we make in immigration have far-reaching impacts. And so this is something where policy is very important. You need to have a solid policy reason for what you are doing, and keep in mind that that has economic, it has social, it has all sorts of other implications down the line. So maybe, Mark, we can turn to the news release and just clarify, because I think people are confused about what actually was said today.
Yeah.
But this
and
is
I also
the
want to
news
point
release.
out, some people have been making some comments that are just not accurate. So don't assume whoever's summarizing this is, like the one person said, no more CEC. They never mentioned that anywhere. So that's not the case. What the minister did indicate is on November 1st, we would know what the levels plans are for permanent residents. So are they going to keep the economic, the federal high skill, they call it, the express entry category, CEC, FSW, federal skilled trade. Are they going to keep it at the same level? Are they going to reduce it? Are they going to increase it? The minister wouldn't talk about it. He said this is a decision from cabinet. And, he kind of hinted that, well, we haven't turned our mind. Well, that's BS. Of course they have. They've been talking about it since all of this kind of blew up last year. What do we do with the levels? And so we will find out November 1st what those levels will look like. And obviously, if there's a drop of 50,000, or something in the federal high skill, well, it's going to play out in the number of draws and the number of spots that are available. We know right now there isn't enough room to accommodate all of the temporary residents, which I think were, what did they indicate? I think about 1.2 million or something in 2023. I can't remember what the full figure is right now. But there's the reality is they're going to have to make some decisions. They may keep PR the way it is right now, because remember, it's a 3-year plan. But the big thing is that they're going to announce more formally kind of the caps on temporary residence, which, Alicia, I don't know if they have ever done that. Any government has. Now, in the early days, they had hidden kind of quotas that they assigned to visa offices, and then they just wouldn't process more, and processing times would go up. But to actually post caps, this is something new. So we will see how that plays out. Okay, back to you. Sorry.
It's more transparent, and if they're going to have caps, you might as well say what they are. So I agree with being transparent. So here's what they're saying in this news release. Basically, they're saying they are going to do further caps on international students for 2025. And so what they're looking at is, yes, now anybody who's applying for a master's or a doctoral degree is now going to need a PAL, a provincial attestation letter. And so when we looked at the reductions in students so far for 2024, master's and PhD students were carved out of it. And so they didn't have to get a provincial attestation letter. Now they do. And so this is a brand new development. And so what the government is saying is overall, they're shrinking that pool of students by another 10%. And so one of the measures that they're going to use to do that is to pull in the master's and doctoral students, and they will also now need provincial attestation letters.
Yes.
They are trying to do allocations based on population of the provinces, and they are trying to keep 12% of the spots allocated for master's and PhD students under the PALs. So that's
and
one
this
of the
is
things.
Yeah, and this is the issue. Okay, there is just a massive push pull going on right now when it comes within the international student world. It's a big business, and so as soon as the minister made the announcement that masters and PhDs would be exempt from the PAL, then what we saw within a number of schools across the country converting their existing programs from postgraduate X whatever program to masters in order to try to get around that reduction. And I said earlier in the summer, Minister Miller right here, he is not done. And he hinted that if the provinces don't do enough to reduce the numbers, they would take it into their own hands, what the provinces fail to do. And remember, the balance of powers is such that provinces have the jurisdiction, for better word, the ability to administer education within the provinces. That's why it varies. It's different within provinces, including the certification of schools. And overseeing all of that on the education side, that is a provincial responsibility. And so the minister said, look, you guys do your job. We're going to issue the caps, and we will let masters and PhD go forward, as well as some of the other professional designations that they identified. But after that, if you guys don't do enough to reduce the numbers, then we're going to take it into our own hands. And so this day we knew was coming.
Okay, the next really big thing is with respect to postgrad work permits. And we
Yes.
knew this hammer was going to drop, and they've been
Yes.
hinting at it for a while. And so they're going to align it better with their immigration goals and labor market needs. And so as of November 1st, they said that in order to apply and be eligible for a postgrad work permit, so current students right now who are graduating have to hit CLB level 7 for university grads and CLB level 5 for
5.
college grads. Okay, so this is important. I don't think they actually say this in this
No, it's not in here.
summary.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
No.
but that's what they said in the news release, was that as of November 1st, so all you all out there who are students right now, who are graduating from your programs, start studying right now for your English language tests or your French language tests. If you are a university graduate, you have to be showing a result of CLB level 7. And if you are a college graduate, you need to be showing a result of CLB or NCLC level 5. Okay, so that's
And here's
important.
a question, Alicia. This came up. This through our Facebook feed. Why, Alicia? Why a CLB level 7 for university, and when a CLB 5 for a college graduate is required?
And part of this ties to who's getting accepted into the programs in the first place. And so a lot of the programs, especially when we're looking at the student direct stream, you have to have language tests up front anyways, right? Some of them you don't, but a lot of the universities do require a CLB level 7. Some of the programs, like the officer, will not actually accept that study permit unless you can show that you have a high level of functioning language ability, because that usually translates directly into how successful you will be in completing the program in Canada. And so they probably have that 5 versus 7 because a lot of the universities themselves have a higher overall language requirement for their students, whereas some of the colleges may have a slightly lower level. And I wouldn't be surprised, Mark, if the college level starts creeping up to the 7 as well, because they want everyone to be able to have strong language skills. So for a lot of students, I don't know how long they will accept that test for. It might be that they will accept it if it was done within the last 2 years, like Express Entry. I would hope that that's the case. But if you do not have a recent language test, you heard it here first. Start studying and go schedule your test right now, because if you need to get an application submitted for your PGWP starting November 1st or afterwards, so anybody who is maybe graduating this fall, you have to have that language test result or you're not going to get your postgrad work permit, and you have a deadline to apply for your postgrad work permit. So there is going to be a rush on language tests. So go do it right now.
That is critical. I want to reiterate that. Every single time there's been some big announcement, new program that's just been announced where there's any type of a restrictive entry point, language has always been the barrier. It's almost like an unintended restriction on the volume of individuals who get in through the pipeline. And so if you think back to the TR to PR pathway, they allowed in 90,000. There was more ultimately. But the biggest barrier to people getting in wasn't eligibility generally for the requirements or meeting the requirements to go through the international graduate stream or the essential worker streams. It was their language tests had not been written or they had expired. So Alicia's right. Message number 1 from this: if you want to take action, go book your language test. Make sure it is valid. And that's going to be another issue. Yes.
Yeah, and we don't know how long they will accept old language tests. So we don't know if it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 6 months. We don't know. They've not said. All they've said is that you have to have a valid language test. I would hope that they would accept it for at least a year, but they haven't said. So book your language tests and make sure that you are hitting that CLB level 7 or 5 if you're looking at a college. If you're not hitting that CLB level 7, you need to take a new language test, right? So it's not one and done. You can keep taking them until you get the mark that you need. So make sure that you're retaking them. Keep in mind, for Express Entry, IELTS 1 skill retake, they won't accept. So it might be the same case here where you actually have to get 7 across the board. You can't do just that 1 skill retake. So be careful with that. So
okay, next on our
PGWPs,
list.
yeah, super important. Make sure that you are going to be doing what you need so that you're not going to waste your 3 years. They're also talking about, and I don't know how they will implement this, Mark, but if you graduated from a public college on a PGWP, you may not get a full 3-year eligibility on a PGWP. And so anybody who's gone to a public college, you've got to be really careful that your job has to be related to labor market needs. And I don't know what metric they're going to use, but they are probably going to do a list, or they're probably going to tie it to economic factors for certain regions. But if you are attending a public college and you are counting on getting a 3-year postgrad work permit, you may not be eligible for a 3-year postgrad work permit unless you can tie the program of studies and or your ultimate job to a labor market need. So this is something that they've not given us enough details about, but it's something that can affect a lot of you.
Yeah. I'm just going to pull this up here. So Zach says, how will a spousal open work permit be affected for recent graduates that have a postgrad work permit application pending? And this is one thing, it's really difficult because we will need to wait to see how they ultimately roll this out. The program delivery instructions are the single most important thing that we follow because they're the actual directives to the officers and how they are to process applications. And so there's a lot of the details, the finer nuances that we will absolutely be here to explain things the moment we learn. We don't want to speculate, but generally speaking, aside from some, unusual instances, when individuals are already in the system, they don't traditionally then retroactively apply restrictions to them. So I don't know, Zach, if you've already submitted a spousal open work permit with the postgrad work permit, but typically in these situations, when you've already submitted it, they don't just say, well, oh, sorry, now we didn't get quite to processing your application, so now the new restrictions will apply to you. We haven't seen them do that a lot within immigration. So if you have applications pending, usually they have the date, the effective date, when the new policies will be implemented. And in most cases, it's very rare. I'm not sure if I could even think of one off the top of my head where they said, well, no, too bad you got your application submitted, but we're not going to proceed forward. The only instance, ironically, is when the Conservatives called out hundreds of thousands of federal skilled worker permit permanent resident applications back in, when was it? I'm trying to remember when it was, like the early 2000s, 2010s. I can't remember when they did that. But yeah, they just returned a bunch of applications that were submitted because they needed to start fresh. Well, at least in their view, that's what they felt. So, yes.
And to come back to what's changing, and I've seen a few comments about what's happening with open work permits for spouses of students. So this was a different question because this was talking about when somebody's graduating and they're applying for their PGWP, can the spouse be eligible for the open spousal work permit? But now we're talking about they are announcing changes also in this news release to work permit eligibility for spouses. And so they've already cut down on this of students, so spouses of an active study permit holder. And so what they're saying now for this is that the only spouses of active students who will get open spousal work permits will be those who are doing master's programs of 16 months or longer. And they did start talking about like doctoral programs, C-suite, professional occupations, healthcare and construction. So he started talking about all this in French.
Carve-outs.
But it's not actually in the written news release. So this, again, like Mark said, we need to wait for the program delivery instructions to come out on November 1st, or hopefully before that, to figure out exactly what they mean by this. But if you are a spouse of somebody who's on a study permit, and that study permit is not a master's program of at least 16 months in duration, that spouse probably won't get that open spousal work permit. So that's another big change that is being announced and released today. All right, so these are the key things. Overall numbers are going down for students, postgrad work permit changes, work permit changes for students, spouses of students, and then we're looking at tying basically economic goals to who we want to be giving those PGWPs to and the length of those PGWPs.
Yeah, there was a lot of background information that both ministers provided leading up to the actual announcement. And one of the things I want to point out to everyone repeatedly, at least in what I call the modern era, this more recent era, they have, they've really drilled down on the fact that temporary is temporary. And I also found it interesting. I can't remember if it was Minister Miller or was the other minister, but they said, look, people do not have a right to come to Canada. It's a privilege to come to Canada. And I remember once I brought that up in one of my live streams a few years, that's probably 2-3 years ago. and oh boy, I got quite a bit of backlash that I was not a very nice person. And, but understand, this is the world that we're in. And they are under unbelievable pressure to make sure that they are putting Canadian citizens and permanent residents, existing permanent residents, and mostly Canadian citizens, the voting populace, at the forefront of their policy decisions that they're making. The interests of Canadians first, and permanent residents, foreign nationals are kind of second and third. That's the priority. But notwithstanding that, Canada as a humanitarian country, as a country who values, our role in just improving the lives of people, not only here, but around the world, we take that responsibility seriously. And it's part of what makes us Canadians. There are times when it would appear, at least whether it's in the media or on, wherever you're consuming your information, that the interests of Canadians are at odds sometimes with the interests of foreign nationals in Canada and immigrants. And it is a very, very delicate balance. And so neither Alicia nor I, want to wade in. And there's a lot of comments from people, very opinionated. And it's really easy to post those comments anonymously, in social media. But I want everybody to understand that we understand there are two sides to every debate. And somewhere in the middle is where reality is. And
it's probably about 8 sides to every debate, right? It's not
enough.
just 2.
Yeah. It's a spectrum, I guess, is the better way of describing it. And so the most important thing from all of these discussions is that there is an ability to just sit back for a second and stop talking. Like, people do far, far too much talking. Just sit back and just listen and try to understand the perspective of the other person. Sometimes we're too bent on winning, and that's what politics is right now. It's talking points. It's obviously it's votes. This is like Minister Miller. He quietly commented that, when it comes, the supports they're providing for moms to be able to get back into the workforce, but yet still feel like they have the support, to have children and have families, that whole discussion. He said, I make a good income. And he's right. I have 3 children, but I make a good income. Well, the reality is many people don't. And that can be a barrier to entry into the labor market. And, there's very few families these days that can survive on a single income. And so all of these are topics outside of our immigration discussion, but they still infuse the decision-making going forward. So
yeah. And Mark, I want to get back to that.
Please.
Because a lot of people are worried now about spousal open work permits, because they have said, and so when I look at point 1, 2, 3, 4, it's when it says we are doing these things, limiting work permit eligibility later this year to spouses of foreign workers in management or professional occupations or in sectors with labor shortages under both the temporary foreign worker program and the international mobility program. This is huge. They didn't talk about this live, but this is what they're saying now in the news release. And so this is not just students anymore. This is everybody. And so this is a big deal. So if they are now going to be limiting the ability of a spouse to be able to get an open work permit to only primary applicant workers who are in management, professional occupations, so this is where he was talking about C-suite, or in sectors with labor shortages, that's a big deal. That means that only the principal applicant can come unless they're in these sectors. And that's under the international mobility. So that's like IEC work permits, that is anybody coming under the free trade agreements. Temporary foreign worker, of course, are LMIA based, but that is giant. And it's also Francophone mobility programs as well. So if they now change their policy to limit open spousal work permits across the board, that will be a big deal.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I was just going through a couple things that I wanted to point out as well, and then we'll get to people's questions, and I'll pull up some comments and we'll watch it. But one of the things that has not been discussed, Alicia, and the ministers, they talk about the need. Let me just read some of this. So they talk about 99% of economic growth in Canada. I'll just go back here. 99% of economic growth in Canada relies on immigration. And, they said by 2032, which is kind of the year, all the statistics and the projections and things like that. That's kind of what they keep referencing 2032. they said all population growth will be as a result of newcomers to Canada. And what does that mean? It means that families, couples are not having more than 2 children. And in many cases, maybe only 1. So it's newcomers that will continue to allow our population to grow. And he also pointed out, I think, did he talk about South Korea as a country that's really facing problems because of the lack of population growth? And I think there was some reference to one of those countries, and they don't want to be in that situation. And then Boisonneau said, Minister Boisonneau said, 400,000 skilled trades will be retiring by 2032. And he said, in fact, with where we need to go with building homes and all those kinds of things, we're actually going to need 300,000 on top of that.
So the gap will be 700,000. Yeah.
And I'm a farm kid. Okay. The vast majority of my family are trades as well. They're farmers. There's, welders, arborists, auto mechanics, those kinds of things. And I tell my kids over and over, I said, I've got one son who wants to be a doctor, another one wants to be a dentist, and a daughter's a teacher, and another daughter's thinking she wants to be a vet. And the reality is, how, and this is something you guys will see me starting to talk more and more about this, with the shortage of workers in the workforce that they're talking about. Never once have I heard the federal government talk about the implications of AI on the workforce and the shortages. It's an interesting discussion in the conference I got back from, how is AI going to replace workers in the labor force? And some people were making comments, and this was an American conference, so obviously they have different focuses and motivations than us in Canada, and these views are not my views. But some people said, will we actually need as many people as they're projecting when it comes to the ability to get things done? I'm not talking about paying taxes, supporting the social network in Canada, but in the US, they said, do we need as many workers? Because, will AI be replacing some of these jobs? And it's a real valid question to be asked and to be examined. And I wish that the government would talk more about that. I think it's so new, people just don't know how it's going to roll out. But for the people here, those watching this live stream, the concern is, how do these announcements affect us right now? And what can we expect? The minister also talked about cuts. Someone brought up the cuts. They said, are there going to be cuts to the PR, to the annual levels plans? And he said, nope, we haven't decided. It'll be a decision in cabinet, but November 1st, those of you who are wondering, the annual levels plans and the temporary, I think they're going to roll them out together, is scheduled for November 1st. The minister acknowledged that they let things get overheated for too long, and this is now what they're trying to right the ship, if you will. And then Minister Boisonneau, actually, he said very clearly that the priority of the government is trades. And so if you are wondering, what do I do? How can I find a pathway forward? It's an interesting conundrum, because right now the temporary foreign worker program does not make it easy for trades to apply for labor market impact assessments, because there's a real, you can go through it, but the way it's designed with school and work and the way the whole trades system, when it comes to certification, is set up, and the apprenticeship programs, it's not easy. But for individuals in Canada, that is one area of tremendous opportunity and growth. And so we'll see how that plays out. And I think really, Alicia, like we talked a little bit, and I'll just wrap up just a little bit. There's on the side of the provinces, and some of you who've been watching, the media and the reports, and we talked a little bit about this before, but I just want to kind of wrap this up. Some of the provinces are kind of ticked because they felt the minister didn't give them enough economic spots under their PNPs to be able to transition the people that are already in their provinces. And then the way the premiers, at least the 3 that are kind of really butting heads, have spun it is that, look, if you we have all these people here and we're trying to settle them, we don't have room for more people. And you, as a federal government, decided to let these people in and create, pathways for increased numbers of refugee claimants here. And now you're trying to pass that on to us. So that's kind of the messaging that they're trying to spin. Well, the reality is, the responsibility for fixing the problem is, yes, it starts primarily with our federal government, but at the same time, everybody needs to do their part. And like I said before, when people are here in Canada, it's important that, that we don't vilify people and that we treat people with kindness and respect. And the people that are abusing the system, whether that's abusing the temporary foreign worker program or abusing the asylum system, well, I hope that the tools and resources are given to those decision makers to be able to assess properly, determine when someone is not eligible or there's fraud or whatever embedded within it, and they are removed from Canada. And the rule of law is important.
The other thing they talked about too was the visa requirements. And so one thing that the government always tracks, and they've already done this already partially with requiring partial visa requirements for Mexican citizens, is they keep track of the source countries of refugee claimants in Canada. And if there's a source country where the refugee claims start getting disproportionately high, then there's ways that they can try to have increased visa requirements. And so that is something that they've already done with respect to Mexico specifically. So they are talking about this. The other thing is, it's not necessarily that the level of temporary foreign workers or students right now are directly tied to asylum claims. So those things are also are refugee claims in Canada. Refugee claims happen generally on an ongoing basis, and they are looking. And so part of the problem, or part of the debate between the ministers, provincially and federally, was when they look, and this is something that's been going on not only for refugee claims, but also for other people coming into Canada for the first time, is a lot of people are going to Quebec and Ontario, specifically Montreal and Toronto. And because of that, it's putting a lot of strain on those systems. And so, and they were all speaking in French, but the minister was saying, well, hypothetically, if you were to distribute those refugee claimants across the country, then that would change the numbers. It would take the pressure off of Toronto and Montreal, and it would distribute it across the country. And then this is where there's a whole bunch of rhetoric about these three premiers then saying the federal government is going to force refugee claimants on us, and that is not the case. That was this is wordsmithing. This is not what is happening. And so basically, there are federal funds tied to whatever province the person is coming into to make a refugee claim. And so there is a correlation between that. So that's something that they were talking about as well. And the other thing that they were talking about is that, the provinces are asking for a certain number of allocations of provincial nominees. And that number varies. They have to negotiate it every year. And so this is where the responsibility comes in, that if provinces are saying, well, we want more provincial nominee allocation spots, but they're saying somehow we're not going to accept any refugee claimants in our province whatsoever, those things don't make sense together. And so that's what the whole tension is about. But I think it's really important to demystify and to really get down to what actually happens right now. I also saw a comment, and this is important for people who are trying to look at what are the projected outcomes, what are the occupations that are going to be in demand, and that has applicability for express entry. It has applicability for this new reduction of spousal open work permits to only occupations in demand. So I put the link in there, Mark, in the chat, but there is what the government has been using in the past for express entry is the Canadian Occupational Projection System. They call it COPS. And this is what they use to look at long-term data sets for what are the occupations, what are the labor market needs, not for 1 year from now, but chronic shortages. And this is what they've been using in order to try to create their targeted draws, their category-specific draws for express entry. I would guess that they would probably use this similar sort of data when they're looking at who is going to be the spouse of an in-demand or what the labor market needs are for the future. And so somebody said, where are they getting these data sets from? Probably from things like this, probably from the COPS data, the Canadian Occupation Projection System. So if you want to know about what occupations are going to be in demand based on the data, check here.
Yeah, and I'll just flip over here. It'll be a little bit weird, but you're getting the raw data here. Now, there may be some cases where they have actually summarized it for other purposes, and then you can benefit from it. But generally speaking, you're looking at data sets like this. And you can see the different positions, the knock code. You can search for a knock code here. And then you can see across the top, 2021 projected to 2031 across the top. So
Yeah.
this is
And
kind of the resource.
And I'll send a link to you, Mark, too, but it's kind of like the infographic one from Stats Canada.
Yes.
So if you want kind of something a little bit easier to digest, then there is a document called Labor Shortage Trends in Canada, and it's from Statistics Canada. And so I just put that one in there, Mark, if you want to pull that up. And it's just nicer to look at because it's got the Stats Can. Yeah, this one.
There we go.
So it shows what's happening with our unemployment rates. It's showing which provinces have certain levels, but it's a little bit older, right? It's 2022 that we have the data sets for. And then you can go down if you expand the labor shortage trends in Canada underneath at the very bottom in the description. It only goes to 2022, but you can see it broken down by province as well. So this is just kind of another data set. It's not as up to date as the COPS.
Yeah. And yeah, lots has changed over the last few years. Lots has changed. Okay, great. Thanks, Alicia. That's great. Okay, let's just zip through some of the comments here. I've been pulling up some as we've been talking. And you know, excuse me, like I said, this is very divisive. And I know some people just like to post comments just to kind of rile people up, and you know, but other people are genuinely concerned. And I never want to be in a position where, you know, we're just not allowing people to have a voice because we don't agree with their voice. And so, you know, there's a lot of people that have had a lot all through this, and I wish I could post every single one of them. But we want to debunk a few things. So Raphael says, are they stopping CEC? Alicia, did they say anything about stopping CEC?
They did not say anything about stopping CEC. They did talk about further announcements that they will make on November 1st, whether they are going to start to reduce numbers or certain allocations for permanent residents. And that might have to do with the spousal category, the family reunification category. It might have to do with reducing the number of refugee claimants that they will process in a year. It might have to do with other categories of PR, but they have not said anything specifically about CEC. They've just said that there might be further reductions to overall numbers for permanent residents for their levels plan that they will announce in November, but they have to have a discussion in cabinet first.
Who asked the question? Well, they made a comment. They need to put a nationality cap. They need to encourage diversity the way the US does. And basically what this comment is referring to, every country has a certain number of people that they're allowed in from that country to get, you know, a melting pot kind of an, you know, an equal kind of, allocation of spots by country. And so that's why in, you know, the US, if you're coming from India and you're hoping to get PR, you're probably going to be dead by the time it comes, you know, wait times of 25, 30 years. And, that's one approach. Let's see, we've got a couple more. I better hit these super chats. Igor Souza says, hey, Mark, I got my PR approved, received the first portal email today, but I haven't replied yet. I have a trip next week. Would that have any implication? Okay, this is kind of outside of the realm, but yeah, I recommend, Igor, that you book a consult and we can talk about this because, yeah, trips aside, if you leave and you do not yet have your PR card, it can definitely affect your ability to come back and the need for a permanent resident travel document and how long is that going to take. So yeah, definitely book a consult. Ive says, can high wage director level get a work permit in the current scenario of employer is willing, work permit sponsor for a job? I have a CLB 9 IELTS expiring next month and a WES assessment. What's the best way to get a work permit expedited for BC, please? So can a high wage director level get a work permit in the current scenario? We haven't seen, you know, aside from their restrictions on low wage, there hasn't been any specific restrictions. So I don't think there's any, there's no barriers, I guess, to submitting the application. Ultimately, it just depends on, you know, what the results of the recruitment efforts, if you're going through the LMIA process. Okay. And then I think we are just about, let's just see here. I had one more question here. Okay. Mozahar says, any changes that would affect software developers. So for LMIAs. And Alicia, maybe you could just kind of hit just at a very high level so people understand the distinction, high wage, low wage, what's blocked and what's still open.
Yeah, maybe Mark, you can go to the general hire a temporary foreign worker and hire a low wage position webpage, and we can just show people, because I used to teach a course on immigration and everybody would get confused at this point. And so, all right, we can go to the hire a temporary foreign worker in a higher low wage position. And basically, you will scroll down and you will see here are the provincial median wages. So this is the government taking a look at what are everybody's job in every province, and then basically getting a median hourly wage. And we're going to be looking at the wage rates after April 2nd, 2024. So we're looking in the far right-hand column. In Alberta, the cutoff point is $29.50. They've added up all the jobs in Alberta, and they said the median wage per hour is $29.50. And they have it for every single province. So for BC, it's $28.85. For Ontario, it's $28.39. For BC, it is, we said BC. So each province has a median wage rate. Whether your company is going to be going for a low wage LMIA or a high wage LMIA depends upon what your specific NOC is. So you have to figure out what your National Occupation Classification Code is. And then for whatever position the company wants to hire for, now you're going to go over to the job bank and you're going to do a search, and you're going to figure out for your geographic area, is the median job bank wage rate for your city, for that NOC, higher or lower than this set point? So that's what they're going to be looking at. And so anything that is lower than these listed provincial median wages is going to be classified as a low wage LMIA. And those are now going to come under the new rules that are going to be implemented September 26th. Anything that is in the high wage LMIA, so in Alberta, if your employer is offering you over that $29.50 for your software developer role, then they would be in the high wage LMIA world. But they will definitely have a problem if they're not offering you above that $29.50 rate. So that's what we're talking about. So far they have not announced changes to the high wage LMIAs. It's not off the table, right? The Minister Miller has said that we are still looking at things. And even when they made the announcements last month for low wage, they said within the next 90 days, we're also going to be examining the high wage LMIA stream. So it is possible that there will be future changes with high wage LMIAs. They've not announced them yet.
Perfect. All right. So I just went through, we'll just hit just a couple last ones. I think, Raphael, we covered this. One NOCs can be affected by today's announcement. I'm a software engineer. So we just kind of covered that, but yeah, it comes down to wages, you guys, the high, low wage like we've got here for the LMIA. That's really what it comes down to. And if you are in a higher wage, then you're eligible to submit the application. When it comes to, permanent residence, there was no substantive changes or announcements made that would affect the current situation in terms of permanent residence streams and processes and caps and things like that. We will know on November the 1st. Okay, I'm just going to go through here and we'll just pull up just a few other comments. And these are more just comments from people, and Alicia and I may not have anything to say about it. So Herb Derp says, if we plan on taking this amount of asylum seekers, then we need to cut back severely on permanent resident applications. Well, there's definitely a give and take, and they have overall numbers, and it's cabinet, it's the elected officials that make the decisions as to where the priorities are. If there's an election and the Conservatives get in, they could change the levels. They could change what's, they view as being important and not, but it's a cabinet decision how that's allocated.
And keep in mind that the number of refugee claimants is about 5% of the overall numbers.
Exactly. Yeah. Then we have other strong comments like Ratbat here says Canada is over. Well, I hope not. John says, why favoring asylum seekers? And I think I'm glad you pointed that, Alicia. They're not really favoring asylum seekers when, they form less than 5% of the total allocation. Let's see. Zero Day says, does transport truck driver considered in demand or a profession? So how do they fit in, Alicia, the transport truck drivers?
So transport truck drivers are not a profession. So it might be in demand if you look at long-term rates, because they're under the transportation categories. So take a look at what the transportation categories are for the category-based draws, and those are the ones that they've identified that they will be able to prioritize as part of a category-based round under express entry. So we know that transport truck drivers are often in demand, but we'll have to see what happens with LMIAs, for example. Right now, they've only said that there's carve-outs for primary agricultural and construction. So they have not said specifically anything for carve-outs for low-wage LMIAs.
All right. Jazz says the Conservatives will make immigration much more difficult. Who knows? It's possible. It is possible. The one thing is that people like to get clicks. Hey, I like you to watch our videos, right? And so people say all kinds of things to kind of stir things up, because the algorithm, whether you're tweeting on X or whether you're posting on Facebook or whatever, if there's engagement and people saying you're a crazy person, well, that gets more interest and elevates comments. So people say all kinds of things. But when it comes to Conservatives making immigration more difficult, it's possible they could choose to just prioritize other things too. Okay, Canada Joy says stop fake asylum seekers. Well, I think that's one of the things that the minister talked about specifically, was trying to give the adjudicators within the refugee determination system the tools to be able to make better decisions and to be able to identify people that are abusing the system. Then we've got this person saying that honestly, they destroyed immigration, these guys. Well, that's a comment. Okay. Sonny says, let us come out of recession. We will be begging for people again. And you're right, Sonny. Like, the reality is, I remember in the early 2000s, Alberta as a province had less than 3% unemployment. Remember that, Alicia? Everybody was desperate. In fact, the government would help employers file their LMIA applications. They had blanket approvals where you didn't even need to advertise. And so you circle around pretty much 10 years later, or 20 years later, I guess. Boy, is it really? Maybe it is. Anyways, and we're back in it again. So yes, that's exactly right. And elections and the timing of elections play a big part in all of this.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna I have to slide off, Mark, because I've got a consult booked.
No problem. Yeah. I just told my lunch appointment I was going to be late, but I'm going to keep the conversation going and try to get a bunch more people here. So, all right, okay. I'll pull it up. Thanks, Alicia. Okay, let's slide over here. All right, let's chat a little bit more here, guys. I want to give everybody as much opportunity as possible to get their comments heard, and because it too often, like, free speech and the ability to share your thoughts openly is really important, and to be able to criticize your leaders. People are free to criticize what I do. Like, that's what it means to have a free and open country. And so people can say, and if people say crazy comments, well, you can say, well, I think you're crazy, and that's fine. And you move on, right? Okay, let's see what else we have here for these comments. So Canada Joy says more than 15,000 Bangladeshi came on visit visa by using fake documents. Now they are applying for asylum on fake documents. Well, hopefully they catch that, because that's the kind of garbage I don't like. Whether or not to the extent of, that's the reality, because sometimes perception isn't always reality. We obviously want to clean it up and make sure that it's fair and that people are not abusing the system and getting an advantage over the honest people that are trying to do it right. C. Ocean says he's copying Pierre's campaign with tradespeople word for word. And there's definitely, overlap with that. But there's a reason, because it's a real issue. So all of the parties should be talking about it. All of them. Jeff Taylor says almost 10 years in power and they're just figuring it out. Well, yep, it's hard. And it's easy for us too to look back and use kind of hindsight because it's 2020, I guess. It's perfect vision looking back and saying that's what you should have done. But when you're right in the middle of it, the minister was right. Like Minister Miller did say, in the early days, following, the pandemic, the provinces were begging for more. Well, the reality is, Minister, you did double it, and the minister did double the number of spots for most provinces. But then some of the policies that the Liberal government did put in place, including opening the doors to Ukraine and to Ukrainians and other, Hong Kong, Iran, even the decision to do 10,000 H-1B open work permits, all of those things have an impact. And it's just a matter of sorting out and understanding what that long-term impact is. You look at Roxham Road, where people came in. You look at the decision of Minister Fraser right here to say, hey, digital nomads come to Canada. And then a whole bunch of people came as digital nomads and then looked to find a way to stay permanently. So all of those decisions are never made in isolation. Like, they're never made in a vacuum, and they have impacts. And so that's, it's a fair comment. It's a fair comment. Okay, let's see if there is any other, I think I've got all of those. And I really want to let people, their comments to be heard. I've got so many comments. I have over 532 comments on this. Let's see. Okay, here's a question. This one is from Fabio. He says, well, you need language tests to apply for postgrad, but will it be academic, which they currently have, or general? It'll be general. So guaranteed it'll be general. Let's see here. And AK says, you still need a good IELTS score for CEC. That's true. You do. All right. Brian says they have no clue what they're doing. C Ocean says there's many asylum seekers in Manitoba that have nowhere to live and are sleeping in violent shelters. That's terrible. And that's a situation that we never, ever want to see anyone in. 1500 LE says, Canadians should leave. Haha. Well, that's, I guess that's one thought. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, Johnny says it's absurd to have an IELTS score as a postgrad requirement. Like, the immigration division is there to make money for British Council. Well, they could also write the CELPIP or the Pearson test, right? They could write the TCF or the TEF test. I think they're just trying to find ways to restrict the ability of people to get these, to reduce the numbers. The minister, when he made these comments, he made no bones about it. Their goal is to reduce the numbers. And that's probably a good segue, you guys, because one of the things when I was reading what they were saying, and they were talking about reducing, let's see what I have on my list here as I was making notes. He said with the changes, basically with postgrad work permits and only issuing the 3 years for bachelor's, master's, doctoral level, we don't know what they're going to do for the other ones. The minister said that those changes would likely reduce by 175,000 fewer work permits. And he said that of all the work permit holders in Canada, he said 50% of them are postgrad work permit holders. The limits that they're planning to put on the spousal open work permits, they anticipate it's going to reduce the total number of temporary residents by 50,000 fewer. And then reducing, 50,000 was the spouses of students. And then overall limiting spouses of work permit holders, he indicated that, for however they're going to do that for the high skilled critical sectors, those kinds, he said it could result in as much as 100,000 fewer temporary residents in Canada. So they're going through the process of doing everything they can to reduce the numbers. And that's now their mandate, which ironically, you guys, if you look back to what the minister, the previous minister, even before Minister Fraser, Minister Menachino, during the pandemic, their primary goal, they're all about absolutes, was they absolutely had to hit that 400,000 level for their annual returns, their annual levels plans. And so that's part of the reason why they did the big CEC draw back on February the 13th of 2021, where they allowed in, 27,332 ITAs they issued to transition everybody into permanent residence. So it was all about those numbers. And apparently for the Liberals, numbers are a big, big deal. Okay, other comments. Great to be back. Many young people in Canada finding it very difficult to find jobs during the summer. That is correct. All right, GS says students should be deported. Well, that's one of those comments. That's a crazy comment. Obviously, we value international students. It's a matter of where the right levels are and the the educational programs themselves and the whole economy of subpar schools that surfaced. That was really the issue. Let's see what else we have here. Liliana says, changing rules, but everyone has a role, and a woman can take more than 5 kilogram common citizens when trading jobs. Okay. Let's see. Oh, looks like Danielle liked something I'd said. Okay. Funny Movie says, what about the student that came before COVID and not PR yet? They just stuck in between. Their postgrad expiring. They can't move to other provinces because their work permit expiring in less than 6 months. I know. This is the thing that really breaks my heart, because it's hard. Like, there's just not going to be a pathway for all of you to obtain permanent resident status. It's just not going to happen. And so those who do not have a pathway, the option you have, and really the best choice you have, is to go home. Some people will choose to file a humanitarian and compassion application. Some people will choose to try to file an asylum claim. And if you do not genuinely fit within the parameters for eligibility, I strongly discourage you guys from doing that. Okay, let's see what else we have here. And yeah, we've got so many comments. I know I'm not going to be able to go through all of them, so I'm really sorry about that. Okay. I'm going to go just a little bit longer, and then we're going to shut it down, you guys. It's true. Sunny says the only fault of students is that they came in the wrong time. Yeah. Great to be back, says part of a big mafia. Hey, I'm not restricting these comments. I'm just a commentator now, in the sense that I'm just pulling them up for you guys to review them. These are actually quite comical, to tell you the truth. Actually, I'm going to make this a little bit darker. Let me just see if I can adjust this here. Shadow, edit background, border width, border colorless, border text margin, color. Okay, I think, yeah, I'll just leave it. I was going to darken that up, but I think you guys can see it okay. Okay, Lewis says, elections are not liberals or conservatives. There's a huge problem with asylum seekers, a lot from India and Nigeria. Well, that's perception, right? That's perception. Okay, Johnny says the immigration department should introduce a new rule that unless the country is in war, every other applicant who have idea of taking asylum, they have to tell first when applying for visa. Well, ultimately, Johnny, it's not based on, our asylum policies are not based on war. It's based on whether or not someone has a well-founded fear of persecution based on one of the enumerated grounds. And this is an international standard, and it's designed to help displace people for a variety of reasons. But that's a comment, right? Let's see what else we have here. And then he says, otherwise it will be rejected. So, all right. Some of these comments are quite funny. Okay, and then we've got Common Sense Canada here, or Canadian says, but honestly, most of these people, especially from one country, okay, I know where you're going here, have abused the international student route. They knew the scam deal they made while in India. Now they hear they never been in class. Okay, well, there are examples of people that have abused it, but I wouldn't definitely generalize anything like that. There are a lot of really, the vast majority came, followed the rules, have done everything they're supposed to do. But the reality is now, because there were so many that were seeking and granted entry, that now there is not enough permanent residence space to transition them. Yep, thank you. Most asylum seekers are not coming from a country of war. There you go. You guys correct it. That is correct. Absolutely. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Give me 1 second. Okay, Ramat says, what will be the future on CEC candidates? Why they say low wages, LMAs, 97 business days, but it's taking more than long time. They just haven't updated those processing times. But as far as CEC will be and will continue to be an important part of the PR process. Obviously, with the majority of people already being in Canada, it's the CEC program that they transition to PR with. So, okay. Boy, I've got so many comments. I'll go a little bit more and then I'm going to have to shut her down here. I have a friend who's waiting at we're going out for lunch today and I haven't seen him for quite a while, but this is just a crazy day. So we do everything we can to keep it as live as possible. let's see here. Let's see. Okay, and these are, see, this is, I'm not going to screen these. These are comments people have that I don't agree with. But anyways, another problem right now is we have too many people from one specific country. That's a culture shock for Canadians. Silently, they are changing some behaviors we had. Okay, well, that's a perspective, right? But not one I hold at all. But like I said, it's important for people to have an avenue to express their thoughts. Our interest rate went down to trick people into buying houses before the recession hit. Well, to some extent, that is that they were really encouraging people to do that. Arvin says, open work permit holder, will open work permit extensions along with post-grad work permits be affected if post-grad is applied before November 1st, spouse has tier 5 job? It's about wages too, right? So even if you're in a lower tier, they look at those wage levels. And so there's a number of factors there, Arvind, and we won't know for sure exactly how things are going to play out until they roll out the actual announcements. All right. Oh, let's get to just a couple more. I really want to try to give people a voice. Let's see here. Okay, Arjit, we've talked about this a lot. Did any of the new measures affect spousal open work permits of postgrad work permit holders? Okay, so we covered that. There's a great comment. I'm giving some applause for this one. Great to be back, says, just don't worry about anything and go enjoy your life and have a beer. Well, that's one way. That's one way of dealing with it. It's kind of the head in the sand, but hey, there's something to be said sometimes. I think we've all buried our heads in the sand sometimes. All right, let's see what else we have here. Okay, and then Canada bringing many people into Canada to keep minimum wage low. Well, it does have an impact on wages. It does. Let's see here. Anything else? Okay, JC, we've talked about this one before. JC says, what type of exam should be taken for the English language requirement for postgrad? IELTS, CELPIP, any of the like if it's English, IELTS or CELPIP or the Pearson test. Those are the ones. And general, not academic. Okay. Okay. International students are part of the government, college, and university get-rich-quick agendas. Well, you have to understand the full context, and many of the institutions felt they weren't getting sufficient provincial funding, and so the international students actually helped to bolster that. But yeah, where's the limit? Where's the limit? All right, I think a lot of the same questions that I'm seeing here are ones that we've already addressed within everything here. Okay. Boy, great to be back. You've got all the comments here. Says Canada now, and Canada before. I'm not quite sure what that means. Anyways, all thanks to useless government. Well, all by design. Well, I don't think they designed that, but hey, those are some thoughts. Deborah says, will there be another CEC draw? I'd like to think so. Maybe there's one that's coming today even. Who knows? Yeah, we'll have to see. Okay, anything else here that we can pull in? Lots of the same people are commenting, and I appreciate all of your comments. Let's see what else here. Yeah, some people say we don't need immigrants at all. Well, I think, that's a little bit of a simplistic view, but let's see. Okay, here's Zach says, really worrisome that nothing was mentioned about grandfathering cases for recent graduates, specifically for their spouses. We will see how that plays out. Okay, I think, guys, yeah, there's so many comments. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to have to wrap this up. We've been going for 2 hours and 13 minutes, and so I'll wrap it up. I think I've hit all the super chats. I don't think I've missed any. Yeah, I think we'll end right there. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in. For those of you who are tuning in late, what happened basically is that the Minister of Immigration and basically the Minister over the Temporary Foreign Worker Program both did a press conference today, which it looks like I turned that off. No, I didn't. Here it is. And we did a live stream, basically, a watch party where we listened live to the comments that were made. Those of you who are wondering, well, what were the big highlights? There's a site right here, and if you go through the chat, you'll be able to see the link was posted repeatedly that talks about strengthening the temporary residence programs for sustainable volumes. It's all about them finding ways to reduce, essentially, is what they're focusing on. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. Those who are new to everything that we've been doing here, I just want to reiterate once again that tonight, those of you who are going through Express Entry, remember that I have the Canadian Immigration Institute, and we've created our 2024 Express Entry Accelerator course. That course, let me go here, Alicia was there. That course has been something that I've had since the beginning of Express Entry. And I will show you very quickly. There's a link that allows you to get in. We'll go up here and in a link in the notes here. And if you just scroll down to the link, it should take you right here where you can learn more about the course. The Express Entry course is my mothership of all courses. It is the one I've spent more time honing. And every Wednesday evening at 4 p.m. Mountain Time, that is tonight at 4 p.m. And then every other Wednesday, I have a masterclass that's focused exclusively for people who've subscribed to the course. You can come back as many times as you want. The course itself, it has over almost 10 hours of content, and it's currently priced at $347 US, but that is lifetime access to all of the updates, including an update that I'm working on right now, which is AI infusion. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you guys hang in there. Stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that. And any changes, any specifics that we can roll out, especially for those of you who are wondering whether or not you can stay, what the options are, we'll be here to share the latest information with you.